Jill Wallace and Zach Smith, and they are going to be manning the chat box and helping out with the Q&As. So as we go through, those are two places where you can add questions that you may have as we're going through the modules. And Lauren Whetstone is also on the call, and so I'm going to let her take over.
Hi, everybody. Jesse, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure. So I just wanted to give a welcome to all of you, say thanks for joining us today to learn more about PEARS for reporting your SNAP-Ed activity. So beyond PSE, which many of you have done already, for this introduction to using PEARS for the rest of your SNAP-Ed activity. We're really excited about expanding California's use of PEARS to include all of your program activity. And very excited that all of the SIAs are going to be using a common system for reporting, allowing us to paint a more thorough picture of all of California's SNAP-Ed information. There's a lot that we have to look forward to about evaluation in California in using this system. I want to start by saying that we fully expect lots of questions today, and we want to acknowledge that this is a new system for all of us. So again, we know there'll be lots of questions. There are representatives, I think, today from all of the state implementing agencies. And we're going to try to answer as many of those questions as we can today. But please be patient, as there may be some questions that we will want to take back to the state evaluation work group that has members of all state implementing agencies to discuss before we give a definitive answer. So again, we'll try to answer as many as we can today, but we may say, you know, we want to take that back and have a more full discussion about it before we have a final answer. But if, as Jesse said, you'll type your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we want to make sure that we have a record of all of the questions so that we can make sure that we respond to all of them, and to help us prepare a document that may have some information or frequently asked questions like we did for the PSE webinar, and have that available and updated to answer your questions. So again, welcome to everybody, and I look forward to your questions and to the overview of the system. So back to you, Jesse.
Thanks, Lauren. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So as many of you know, this is what you're going to see when you log into PEARS. And since I haven't done much, there isn't a lot showing on my overview, but as I start entering my program activities and success stories, we'll come back to this page later and you'll be able to see that some of this has a little bit more filled in. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out on this page while we're here. First, you'll be able to see some of our notifications. So some things that are timely, like the beginning of the 2017-2018 reporting period, new guidelines on how sex is reported from FNS. Those are some of the things that you're going to see in our recent notifications. So some that are in blue up here, those are ones that you haven't read or clicked out of yet. And once you click out of them, they disappear from your home page. However, if you want to, you can see some of the recent notifications here in this little box. So if you click on them, you'll be able to go back and read them and go to any relevant links. Another thing to look at on this page is your recent activity. So if you've been working on a couple different program activities and you just want to go back to the very last one, you can just come over here and you'll be able to see what you've done, and some of those will be links. At the bottom here, you'll have a list of your unfinished items. So this is going to be anything that you haven't marked as complete. And underneath here, you'll be able to see things like your program activities or PSEs that you haven't finished. This is a good place to go towards the end of the reporting period to make sure that everything is marked as complete and you're not missing anything. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start with the plan menu. As you can see, our menu has plan, track, and analyze. And we want this to kind of match your workflow. So the first thing you're going to do is plan out the survey instruments you use. So we'll start with survey instruments. Now, while you're on this page, there's a couple things I want to point out, and they're going to be very similar on all of the modules. First, you'll see this little question mark here, and that is a link to take you to some support documentation. So if you're on a module and you're confused, if you see this little question mark, you can click on it, and it's going to take you to all of the relevant search information, or the relevant support documentation that we have. So we'll click out of that. And another thing to note is that you're going to start by just seeing your own data. And in survey instruments, that's all you see first. But if you want to click out of that filter, if there are other things that you are able to see, then those will show up. You can also search for relevant survey instruments in this search box. So we'll check there. And as you can see, whatever you type in the search starts to populate here. You can filter by other users if you have access to their data. But for now, we will add a new survey instrument. So you're going to do that by clicking this Add button in the top right corner. Now, the first thing you're going to do is select the template that you want to use. And when you choose a template, you're going to be able to see a preview of what that template looks like. And if you click on each question, you can see the kind of response type and the question text. And if it's something like a scaled question, you can see the options for that. And we're going to use the food behavior checklist. And this also has an option to add questions. So when you click that, you can type another question. And then you can choose the kind of response type you want. So as you go through, there are some predefined responses like age or an agree to disagree, yes, no, different things like that. Or you can choose custom responses. So you could do a scaled and choose some options. And you even have a button here where you can add additional options. So once you have made any customizations that you want to your survey instrument, you can go ahead and click Create. Well, we'll leave the customization off of that. Nope. And as you'll see, if you forget a box, it'll be highlighted in red. So you'll add your name, and that can be customized. It doesn't have to be exactly the same name as the template. So if you wanted to add something like this is going to be maybe a pre-survey, you could add that, or whatever makes sense to you to tell it apart from the other survey instruments you create. So we'll go back towards the bottom and click Create. And now we can see that food behavior checklist survey. Now, I want to point out that this is not where you're going to be able to enter your response data. As you can see, I can't click on any of these options. This is just giving me a preview. However, what I can do is print it. So as I'm getting ready to do my program activity, I can print this out. And as you can see, this is a different format than we saw over here. That's because if there's a PDF version that we can upload, that's uploaded when you click print, that's the version that you're going to get. Now, if you decide to add custom questions, those will not be included on this PDF. So you'll want to print over here. And you can do that by right-clicking and printing your web page. There also may be included instructions, and you can click those here. So that, in a nutshell, is how you create your survey instruments. Lauren, do you want to hop in and give any information about what's going to be specific for California?
Sure, thank you. And I can answer one of the questions that came in also. So I just wanted to add that for this year in FFY18, there's still discussion around how the survey section will, what kinds of requirements there will be for that. I know for right now that agencies that are funded by UC CalFresh will be entering information for the food behavior checklist and Plan, Shop, Save, Cook. For CDPH funded agencies, we are not requiring any data entry. So even for impact outcome evaluation, you do not need to enter your surveys into PEARS for 2018. At least that's a discussion for right now. So we want to finish having the conversation with all of the SIAs about how the survey section will be used, but do know that for UC CalFresh, for those 2 surveys I mentioned, that folks will be entering for UC CalFresh into the survey section. I think, let me see. Yeah, I don't think there were any other questions. So that's great. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions about survey instruments, then we will go ahead and move on to the track menu, which is how you're going to track all of the activities and success stories, partnerships, coalitions, all of that. So we will move on to program activities. And as you can see, the format's very, very similar on all of the modules. So you're probably familiar with this from the PSE module, but again, we have our filters, our search, and when we want to add, we will just go up here and click the Add button. Now we'll start with the program activity name, and then we'll choose a site. Now, I think that California requires these to be pre-approved, so you're going to want to be sure that before you add a site, it's been approved, and make sure that you're checking different ways it could be spelled to be sure that it's not already in the system. So there are a couple ways you can look for a site. You can start by looking just for the name, or you can look for the actual physical address. So then we will move on to unit. So you will choose the unit that this program activity is going to be based in, where it was delivered. Next, you will add delivery people. This isn't a required field. As you probably remember from PSEs, anything that's bolded with the red asterisk is going to be required, and anything that's not bolded and doesn't have that asterisk is not required. However, if you have people that have entered the program or have delivered the program but are not entering it, this is where you're going to want to put them. And we're never going to assume that just because you're entering the program that you delivered it. So if you delivered it and you're entering it, add yourself as well. Now, one caveat here is that if the person who delivered the program isn't a PEARS user, you're not going to find them in this list, and you won't be able to add them that way. So I believe that they're going to be counted under volunteers. And so another way that you could give them credit is by maybe adding their name up here in your name or in the comments section. And so you'll want to add them as volunteers. So maybe you had a teacher that helped, and then you'll want to add the total number of hours that all volunteers have worked. So if you have one volunteer who worked 4 hours, that would be your total. However, if you had 2 volunteers that worked that same 4 hours, you'd actually enter 8 total. One other note about the delivery person field is that that's going to show anyone else in PEARS that program activity. So regardless of any other permissions that they have, they will be able to see the program activity, and they won't feel the need to enter it. So it prevents duplicate data entry. They won't be able to edit anything. So next, you're going to add your sessions, and if you have questions about what constitutes a session, we have that little question mark again. But all you're going to want to do is add the date for each time you met for that program activity. So maybe I had a meeting every Wednesday in October, and they were each 60 minutes long. You can optionally add the start time or choose whether or not you're using interactive multimedia. And with that, if you hover over the IM, it gives you some examples and definition for what constitutes interactive multimedia. So for every date that you meet, you just go in and add your start date and the length. So we'll go ahead and do that for every Wednesday in October. Now, if for whatever reason you don't end up having one of these sessions, let's say school was canceled and we didn't meet with our class this day, you can go ahead and remove it by clicking the minus box there. So that's all I have for that page. Lauren, do you want to add some information?
Sure, thank you. And I think we had another question in the Q&A that I might do this way. But I first wanted to talk a little bit about the program activity name. So based on your feedback from those of you who participated in the pilot last spring, for California, we have developed guidelines for naming program activities so that there's going to be some consistency across all of our state implementing agencies. So the naming convention is going to use the target audience and the length of the direct education. We'll use abbreviations to make it a little easier for you guys to enter. So for example, a class series for adults will be abbreviated as capital A, capital E, hyphen series. So AE hyphen series. And after you use that naming convention, you can add, as Jesse was just mentioning, you can add extra information that's useful for you. So if there was like a classroom number or a volunteer educator's name, the language, whether the series was garden-based, any additional information that you would want to add after the naming convention, feel free to do that for you guys, so that will make it helpful for you. There's also going to be a CDPH specific, there will be CDPH specific instructions for customizing the name if you have a subcontractor. So for example, if you wanted to track which subcontractors were doing which activities, you would put like AE hyphen series and then the subcontractor name after that if you wanted to track that. So I know I just went over that fairly quickly. We have developed a one-page summary document that's going to be made available with materials for the webinar. So we are pulling together lots of materials and supporting documents, and we will let you know the exact location. We're still working on the exact location for where those documents are going to live so that they're accessible to everybody. But we will prepare that document, and that will be included in that group of materials. And I think, yes, somebody just asked if we were going to give a cheat sheet with the activity names and what types of activities will be underneath that. We will do that. Oh, let me see. Did I see the Q&A questions? Okay, I'm going to look. Joel's asking me if I saw the Q&A questions. So hold on one second. Yeah, let's see. Is there a list of titles? Yes. Will sessions need to be input on a monthly or quarterly basis? Actually, you have access to the system whenever you want, so you can enter them on whatever frequency you would like, but are we requiring them, Evan, then on you required them before on a quarterly basis?
It's best to enter them as soon as possible, and then you'll want to talk with your program to see what dates are required for quarterly and semi-annual reporting.
Okay, so enter them. I mean, we would recommend entering them as soon as possible, so they get done, everything's fresh. But then check with your state implementing agency about the exact requirements for reporting your activities. Let's see. There were some questions about sites, so I'm going to go over a little bit of information about sites, and then we can get back to the other questions. So in the site section, you will be able to add approved sites to PEARS. So you will be able to, if you don't find a site and it's approved, you will be able to add that site to PEARS. But you have to follow the site change process that's outlined in the program directive on the CDSS SnapEd SharePoint site. So before you can enter a site, it must be approved. The state implementing agencies will review sites in the PEARS system monthly to check for duplicate sites and addresses. So please be sure that the site you add is not already listed. I know sometimes it's a little bit hard to find. Also be really careful because there are sites with the same name in multiple counties. So there might be a school, for example, I think John Muir Elementary School, for example, there might be multiple of those across the state of California. So just make sure that you're one, when you're finding a site, that you're using the one from your county. And second, if you want to add a site, just make sure you look a little carefully and make sure that it's not already in there. So again, you're allowed to add sites, but they must be approved before you enter them. So you have to go through the exact same process of having site approval before you enter them. Let me go back and look and see if there are other questions we want to answer now. Okay, I went over site additions. Sites from the ATF are in the system. Right now, the site list is the 2017 site list.
And I'm updating the 18 right now.
Yeah. And Evan's updating the 2018 right now, so it will be entered shortly. Will there be an autofill for the name selected for California? I think that's probably about the program activity name, and no, there won't be an autofill for that. And the sites, when you go into the drop-down, the sites will not be specific to the county. But remember that you can search for sites, as Jesse's showing you right now. So you don't have to scroll through the whole thing. You can search for sites by the address. You could search for sites by the name, and those will pull up. So you don't have to scroll through the whole list to get to them. And if you find a duplicate site, recommendation would be to let your state implementing agency know, and then we're able to delete the duplicate ones. So let us know. That'd be great. Let us know if you find a duplicate site. Let's see in the Q&A. Barbara, there's a question specific to UC CalFresh. So when counting volunteers, do we count only UC CalFresh enrolled educators, teachers, or can we count anyone who assisted with the activity? I don't know if Barbara or Jennifer, you want to answer that one? You guys there? Okay, I'm going to go on to the other ones and see if Barbara or Jennifer come on in just a second. The guidelines for naming program activities are confusing. Can we contact you for support if we need additional guidance? Yes, certainly you may do that. And hopefully the list, the one-page document that we have will make that more clear. It's a little bit hard to describe on the phone like this, so I hope the document will make that clear. But certainly if it's not clear, we're happy to help you and answer any questions about that. Is the program activity name associated with the IWP, for example, 1.1.2? It's not necessarily. We had not envisioned it that way, but I imagine that might be something that you could do if that was helpful for you, would be to put that in your name. I hadn't really thought through it. Does that? Actually, that might be something we can talk about with the group too. So that's a good example, and we'll make a note of that. Do we still send Evan when we add? Do we still send to Evan when we add sites to the targeting spreadsheet? No, you don't need to send to Evan, but that was one thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned. When you add the site, once you have your site approved and you add it to PEARS, please make sure that you also add it to your site list. So that adding it to PEARS doesn't replace adding it to your site list. So please make sure that you still add it to your site list. Is that right?
It should already be added and approved to the site list before they add it to PEARS.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so it has to be approved and added to the site list before you add it to PEARS. And yes, for CDPH, send duplicate sites to evaluate snaped@ucanr.edu. Yes, that's fine. Yep.
Hey, Lauren, am I off mute now?
Yes, now you are.
Great, terrific. Sorry about that glitch. So this is Barbara at UC Cal Fire. Just wanted to loop back to that question about volunteers and counting volunteers. So if it's an extender who's working with the program or a volunteer helping to deliver the education, that would be great. Then go ahead and report them under that volunteer number and their hours as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, and let's see, we had another question. Where do we report train the trainer activities, such as training to parents from approved schools, but at a training location that's not on our list? Well, I'm thinking, hold on. Do you have a sense of?
Right now, the only place would
hold on one sec, we're considering.
Right now, the only place would be in the partners section with meetings and events.
Oh, okay. Okay, Evan just mentioned that there's in the partners section, there's a meeting and events. So let's look at that when we get to that, and that may answer your question. If not, we'll make sure we come back to that.
Lauren, this is Barbara. So it might be that actually it's not systematically gathering all the training that is done to extenders and stuff to deliver education. So we can come back to that as well.
Okay. And then there's another question. Schools were entered as school, pre-K, school youth, school after school, school adults, different audiences at the same address. Is this still the case?
One address for one.
Yeah, so no, that is not the case any longer. There is one, each site has one address. So you'll be entering all the information at that one site at that one address.
And you'll adjust the audience and the setting for as appropriate for the different target audience that you're seeing at that site.
And are the hours only counting during the activity or planning, follow-up, etc. count too? I think I'm going to bounce that one back to the PEARS team to answer. Or is that dependent upon how we want that to be?
Yeah, that's kind of your protocol. So
okay. I believe that we have always done the length as the actual length of the delivery of the program. So I would say that in this case, unless Barbara or other folks from other agencies have a different thought, and we can also bring this up at our meeting to make sure that there's consensus about this. But for right now, I believe that the length in minutes for the sessions has been the length of the actual program activity.
Lauren, yeah, we would agree with that because that's what's on the EARS form is the delivery of education.
Yes.
So the length of the delivery.
Yes. Okay. So I hope that's clear. So when you put in length, it would be the length of the actual delivery of the program or the session. A comment from one of the project officers here at CDPH, reiterate that a site must first be added to the site list through the site list process before adding into PEARS. Yes, that's true. So we'll say that one more time. Please make sure that you have obtained approval and added the site to the site list through the site list process before you add it into PEARS. So it will not be an approved site unless it's also listed on the site list. So putting it in PEARS is not a substitute for the regular process. Okay, I think, do we have everything for this page? And I think that's all I had. So not seeing anything else, I'll turn it back over to Jessie.
All right, great. Thanks, Lauren. All right, now we're going to go ahead and save and continue and move on to the next page. So this is where we're going to add your custom SNAP-Ed data. So you'll start by the intervention name that's related to this activity. And you'll be able to go through and see a list of things that are specific to California. If you choose that other, please specify, then you will have an option to add what that other intervention is. So for now, we'll just choose this. Then you can choose your priority indicators. So you'll be able to choose whatever you're targeting. And if you're targeting more than one, you can click in the box again and add another. Now you have the option to add your target audience, which can be helpful if your demographics don't necessarily align with the curriculum you had planned. So if you had planned on giving an after-school program that was to, 6th through 12th grade, but all you had show up were pre-K through 2nd grade, it could explain why your curriculum choices don't necessarily match up with your demographic information. So we'll go ahead and choose our target audience there, and then you can also choose your setting. And so these are going to align with the EARS form, and you'll be able to see, you can type in what you're looking for, or you can look and see that underneath these headings, there are 5. It's eat, learn, live, play, shop, work. So I guess there are actually 6. So anyway, you can kind of find some subcategories underneath those main headings. So we'll find our school here. And then you'll be able to choose the primary curriculum that you're using. So whatever curriculum is the main focus. And then if you have additional curricula that you're using to plan out your activity, you can choose others here. And that'll give you the opportunity to choose more than one. Now, any objectives that you have for this program activity can be chosen here. And again, you can start typing one and see things that start to match up. And then you can also choose some intervention topics that you're targeting. And again, you can choose more than one if you're targeting more than one. All right, so Lauren, do you have any comments to add for this section?
Sure, I have just a few things. So on this SNAP-Ed custom data page, we're again looking for ways to ensure consistency across the state implementing agencies in California. So I'm going to start with just a few points about each of the topics. Starting with the intervention name, this is the same list that you use for your PSE reporting. So recall that for California, our intervention names are basically a smaller version of the settings list. So our interventions are going to be categorized basically as settings, but again, a smaller list. But this will be the same intervention name that you used in PSE reporting. In the program activity module, priority indicators, and Jesse talked about the priority indicators. The priority indicators are from the USDA, the SNAP-Ed evaluation framework, and they're focused in this module specifically at the individual level, especially around healthy eating behaviors, food resource management behaviors, and physical activity and reduced sedentary behaviors. So in this section, you should report the indicators that the curriculum is designed to influence. So you're using a particular curriculum. What are the indicators that that curriculum is designed to influence? So for example, on the list, there's a curriculum called Eating Smart, Being Active, and it was developed by folks at Colorado State University. And it's a healthy eating, active living curriculum for adults. So both the short-term and medium-term outcome indicators around healthy eating, food resource management, physical activity, and sedentary behavior, and food safety can be used to evaluate progress and success of this intervention. So we have an intervention. It's designed and focused on healthy eating and active living, and both the medium-term and the short-term indicators at the individual level could be used to assess the success of this program. So just as a reminder, the short-term indicators are focused on goals and intentions, and probably most often associated with single session direct education. Not always, but probably more often associated with single session direct education. Medium-term indicators are focused on behavioral changes and are most likely associated with series-based education. So if you're doing pre-post, for example, of a series-based education, that's what the medium-term indicators will measure. In the primary curriculum field, so that was, sorry, that's related to priority indicators. So if we go to the curriculum now, the primary curriculum field, the drop list contains items from the California approved curriculum list. It's the, I don't know I forget the official name, California SNAP-Ed Integrated Curriculum List, I think is the official name. So the drop downs in the primary curriculum are from that list and also include the materials and approved interventions from the SNAP-Ed Strategies and Intervention Toolkit. So what you want to do is select the primary curriculum that you are using at that site. There's also an opportunity for you to select additional curricula or materials that you're using. If you used an additional approved curriculum, you'll find that on the additional curricula list. But if you used additional approved resources or materials as part of your direct education intervention, then we would ask you to select other approved materials. So the list is in alphabetic order, so the other approved materials, I mean, sometimes we think about other always being at the bottom of the list, but remember that this is in alphabetic order, so other will be sort of in the middle of that list. But you can choose other approved materials and type in the names of those materials. So things like I think Evan told me, like, what were some examples? Harvest of the Month newsletters, or is that what they're, yeah.
Maybe Rethink Your Drink fact sheet.
Yeah, or Rethink Your Drink fact sheet, things like those that aren't specific approved curricula, but are materials that have been approved for you to use. Go ahead and list those here in the under other additional curricula or other approved materials in that section. So that's the additional curricula. In the objectives that are listed here for California are the objectives from the California state objectives. So you'll just choose the objectives from our state objectives that are most related to this, the activity and the resources that you're using. The one last thing I want to mention on this page, and hopefully someone may have already asked this, but if not, as in the page before, we're creating guidelines for the most specific or the most common curricula that will specify the priority indicators, the objectives, and the interventions that are associated with it. So we'll make sort of a cheat sheet again. So for the most commonly used curricula, what would we recommend that you use for priority indicators, objectives, and intervention topics? When we're done developing that, we'll be adding that into the location to be disclosed soon, where we will be keeping all of the materials associated with the webinar and associated with PEARS reporting. And I think that's a lot, but I think that's all I have for this page. I don't know if we have questions. Somebody asked, when will the cheat sheets be available? We are working on finalizing those as quickly as we can. I guess I don't want to say exactly a date yet, but as soon as we can. So I would hope in the next couple of weeks we would have that ready. And how do we get approval for a site to be added? Who do we contact?
That would go through your program officer or the equivalent at your SIA.
Okay. So did everyone hear that? So that would go through your program officer or the equivalent at CDPH or the equivalent at your SIA. So if you need information about how to get for approval for the site, then contact your SIA representative. And then a question, what is the best way to enter data when you conduct many direct ed interventions at the same site throughout the year? For instance, K through 6 education, multiple days at the same site, different curriculum for each grade. Hold on, I'm gonna try to process while I'm thinking. Many directed interventions. So I think that if you're doing direct ed at the same site, then you would still list it here. Sorry, I'm trying to think through what that would look like.
If it covers multiple events over multiple days, then that might be a multi-entry type scenario, where each time you go to the school and implement a curriculum, then you would put an entry on into PEARS. And then the next time you go to the school and implement a different curriculum with a different set of students on a different day, then that would be another entry into PEARS.
So then you may have to do multiple entries for the same site. So you can put in as many activities, I mean, you can name as many activities as you like, even if it's at the same site.
So this is, Lauren, if I can add to that. So yeah, that's right. I mean, especially at a school, for UC CalFresh, it's really common to be working with multiple different classrooms. So each program activity would be what is being delivered to to that set of students. So one program activity might be for a certain fourth grade class, and they'd be adding each of the individual sessions in the whole series over the course of the year. And then there might be another fourth grade class that's being entered separately.
Thanks, Barbara. That's right. Yes. So you can go back and enter as many program activities as you need for the work that you're doing in the school. Let's see. How do we report activities that we do with K through 5 and 6th grade, as some of our schools include 6th grade under target audiences?
Yeah, you could actually include multiple target audiences. So you could include both the 3rd through 5th and 6th through 12th, just because it's not encompassing that entire audience, it is a portion of it. So, and again, that's not required, but it can be useful.
Thank you, Jessie.
Sure.
And then there was a question about whether this was, I think, oh, it just went away. There was a question about whether this was just for direct ed. And for right now, the section that we're talking about is just for direct education. So we will get to, Jessie will get to the section on indirect activities in just a bit.
All right.
I think we got everything so far. So I think that's it. So we're ready to move on.
Great. All right, well, we're going to save and continue and move on to demographics. Now, one thing to note is that if you are working in a school that has a CDS code, you're going to have your demographics information pre-populated. You're just going to have to get the total number of participants. And so right now we're going to be working on a way to pull that demographic information, and that'll be available sometime in 2018 before the end of the reporting period, definitely. But what you're going to do is go back to your program activity information page and enter that total number of participants in your comment section. So make sure that you are entering the number first, and then you're entering any other comments later. But we need that number to be first so that we can pull a query later and take that number and pre-populate your demographic information. And again, this is just for use sites that have a CDS code. So if you have a site that is not associated with a CDS code, we're going to go back to the demographics information page, and I'm going to show you what that process will look like. So I went ahead and underneath the progress bar clicked on demographics. So we're back here now, and if you don't have that code, then you're just going to go through the normal process, which will include adding the total number of participants and choosing how you determine the demographic makeup. So if it was an actual count or if you estimated, and then your source of data. Was it commercial market data? Was it a survey, a visual estimate, something else? And if you choose other, then you're usually going to have an option to specify what that other was. So we'll say we did a survey. Now, one thing to note on this page is that for that, you see this auto calculate up here. Right now, I can't click on it. because I don't have any attached survey data. However, if I attached my surveys first, then and put data in that way, and I had demographic information that could be pulled in, I could go and put my survey information in first and my survey responses and auto-calculate. However, if you're not going to be using the survey instruments piece, then you're just going to want to do it this way. So as you can see, if you have numbers that don't match up, you're going to get this red explanation that says that the sum of our age and sex fields must equal our total participants. So that'll help you, keep you from maybe miscounting or typing the wrong number somewhere. So we'll just go through here and add our number of participants. And right now, you do have the option to add unknown. So if you only have the age information, then you can add that, and it will kind of help you put your demographics in here, even if people don't fill out your demographic information cards or anything. So if you're working in a school, you know that you definitely have your participants in this 5 to 17 age range. However, if you don't get a count of the male and female, you still have an option to put that in. And the age and sex fields are going to be, as you can see, they're not going to let you submit it if the numbers don't match your total. However, with ethnicity and race, we realize that you don't always get that information, and sometimes the numbers don't match up. So you may have some people that report ethnicity and some people that don't. And so if you do have these numbers, report what you have, but you're going to still be able to submit if your ethnicity is lower than your total number of participants. However, you can't be both Hispanic and non-Hispanic, so your number could never be higher. You could never have someone that shows both. With race, that's not the case. You can have someone that chooses multiple races, and we're going to want to capture each race that's represented. So if you have someone that chooses both American Indian and African American, you're going to want to select one, you're going to want to add one to each of these race categories for each thing that a person has selected. So we don't have any validation on this race field. If you go over the total number of participants, that's okay, because you could have someone that marked every single box, and that would be fine. You just want to make sure that each race that a person has marked is represented here. So I will take a break and let Lauren go over this.
Okay, I'm actually going to let Evan chime in on this part. So Evan's going to add some information to this.
Am I going to answer them?
Oh, yeah, go ahead and do yours, and then we can do it.
I don't have anything to add.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, actually, I guess we don't. I think Jesse covered that very thoroughly, so I guess we don't, but we just wanted to answer a couple of questions. Then there was a question asking if the school number listed on the first screen should be unduplicated.
The school participants, as well as the participants on this demographic page, are just going to be the people that are at that specific event. There's no longer a repeat or first-time participant category when reporting into the participants. So anytime that you're going to be reporting participants, either for schools in the comment section or with data cards, on this page, everything's going to be everybody that attended that event, regardless of if they've been to any other SNAP-Ed events previously.
Thanks, Evan. And then I think there were a couple of other questions here. Let's see. Do we need to report age and sex for school-based interventions that do not require data cards?
For any of the directed events at the schools, and this has to be a public school with a CDS code. You will just enter in the participant information on the first page in the program activity information under the comments section at the very bottom. The participant number will have to be the first thing in the field, and it has to be a numerical value. Don't type in like 25 as words. Make sure you just put the number in. You can put other comments after the participant number, but just make sure you put the participant number first. And if you do that, then we'll be able to go back and apply the race and ethnicity fields from this California Department of Education to the demographic page. If you do not follow those steps, then you'll have to do that manually, most likely selecting an auto calculator or something to that effect, but you'll have to go back into the entries after the update is made and do that yourself if you do not follow the protocol for participants in schools.
Remember, and I think Jesse had said that that will be available sometime in early 2018, that feature to use the CVS codes to get the demographic information.
So for now, if you're working in schools and you've put the participant information in the comment fields, leave the entire demographic section blank.
There was another question in the chat box about someone who had to step out for a minute. Let's see. Are we working in schools? Is it working in schools the same where we don't have to collect data cards? So yes, that's true. You do not have to collect data cards in schools that have the CDS codes. Let's see. Another question: are we able to remove age and sex information if it was already entered?
Yes, you can overwrite that.
Okay. So yes, you can do that. Are we still using the PEARS form to collect this data? And if so, do you have an updated form? The current one includes other and more than one, but does not ask them to specify. So how would we decide which to add them to? Do you, Laura, do you mean the data card instead of the PEARS form? If that was the case, would that, can you see? Oh, sorry. I'm turning this so Evan can see the question. I think maybe you mean the data card. Let's see.
There will be an updated data card to reflect these changes.
Okay, yes. So yes, she means the data card. So yes, we're working on an updated data card. So there will be one that will be available that reflects these changes, and that will be available with the materials. And also, CDPH folks can get those from the project. From you. Oh, sorry, from Evan. So CDPH folks can request those new data cards from Evan, but we'll also make those available in the same place where we're going to be placing the materials for PEARS reporting. Let's see, a person asked, there's another question, what if a participant identifies as a race that is not listed? What should we enter?
So if they enter in a race that's not one of the categories, and just note these categories are approved by the Office of Management and Budget in the federal government. So we have to report on these 5 races. But if they report on something that's other than one of these, you will need to recode it when you enter it into the system as one of these 5. So a lot of times they'll list, our participants will list their specific country of origin, or maybe like a race that's not quite listed here. So let's say if they say they're Filipino on their data card, then you would need to recode that as a Pacific Islander when you enter it into the system. So they can report other races. You'll just need to put them in one of the 5 categories that's provided here.
Okay, thanks, Evan. There's another question. How do we track students that identify out of the male-female binary? So, for example, trans students. I don't know. I think that we have said that, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, that for right now, those are going under unknown. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's going to be our other category. So that way you do have an option to report on that, but this follows the EARS form, and it doesn't, the EARS form doesn't go past these 3 categories. So that's how we're going to report it for now.
Thank you. There's another question. How do we enter an activity that involves youth from multiple schools, a community setting, when we teach a class for youth, but the kids all attend different schools? I believe, Laura, if you're teaching that activity, and Barbara and Evan, anyone else chime in if I get this wrong, but if you're doing an activity that involves youth from multiple schools and you're teaching it, for example, in a community setting, then you wouldn't choose schools as the setting, but would in fact choose a different setting in the program activity information page.
And we can provide more guidance on that offline, Laura.
Oh, okay. Did you hear that, Laura? So we can give you more details offline if you want to ask that question, if you need more detail on that. But there's up in the program activity information, if it's not a school-based program, but you were doing that at a community center or something, you could choose that as your setting. Let's see, another question. How do we report someone who identifies Hispanic for ethnicity, but for race they do not identify with the American Indian Alaska Native race definition or any other race? For example, this person is from Guatemala or Mexico. How would we identify this individual? So you're saying that they mark Hispanic for ethnicity. Are they asked both ethnicity and race on the data card?
The general protocol before was to recode them usually as white and Hispanic, because that covers the Latin America countries as well, although it sounds weird, it does. Now, if they do not mark one and you don't feel comfortable with recoding them, since the races don't need to match the ethnicities, you can technically not report it. I highly suggest you trying to find a category that it can go under. So it's up to you and how comfortable you feel with recoding responses after the fact.
Okay, let's see. Since we are entering multiple workshops in one program activity, how do we enter the multiple outreach demo numbers?
All of the sessions that are reported in one activity should be continuations of that activity. So multiple sessions of the same curriculum over multiple days.
Yeah, right. So if they were actually different kinds of workshops, then you would actually do them as a different program activity, right? So in that front page when you're listing the different sessions, that should be multiple sessions of the same curriculum or the same series-based education. If you were doing multiple kinds of workshops with different audiences, then you would actually record those as different program activities. Barbara, I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, but.
No, that makes sense, Lauren. If you were doing a workshop and it was a single session workshop, that would just be reported as one single session, right? Only use those series when it's like a series of a curriculum.
Yeah, series of a curriculum or series of a particular education activity. Another question, are we no longer uploading data cards?
Right now, because of a ADA compliance issue, we can't upload all of the data cards to the public-facing website, so we are working on hosting that in another way. And
Well, yeah, we're working on what that's going to be and where that's going to be, so we will let you know about that as soon as possible. Let's see. For school-based setting, if number of participants is entered in the comment section and not the demographics section, how do we proceed to the next section without filling out the demographics? Once you fill in the information in the program activity, the very first page under program activity information, once you fill that in, you can skip around to the other sections without having to complete them in order. So you do not have to complete them in order. You could do program activity information, SnapEd custom data, and then skip to attached survey instruments, for example. Am I right, Jessie?
Yes, yeah, you're right. We just need that first section filled out because there are some fields that are going to be dependent on things that you're filling out on that first page. But once you've filled that out, you can skip around. Some people like to go do their survey instruments first. Some like to do it in order. So yeah, the only thing is you're not going to be able to mark it as complete until we've filled out the demographic information, but it won't technically be complete. So it should be fine.
Thank you. We had a question, here's just a general question about, do we need to request new login for users, or is it the same as the ATF? It is not the same as the ATF, and if you don't currently have a PEARS user account, you'll need to contact, I have some contact information at the last slide. I'm going to show you a slide at the very end. It'll have contact information for each SIA, and you'll know who to contact to get a username. It's also listed, I believe, that Jessie will show later on the resource page in the directory, and you'll also see that information there. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's see. We currently have to list the schools as the sites in order for the school demographic data to be used. Yes, Laura, I'm not sure if that was a question or a comment, sorry.
yes.
But yes, you would need to list the school as the site if you wanted the data from the CDS code to populate the demographic data when that's available.
And this might be an extension of your question about multiple schools in a community setting.
I
can
see.
help you with that as well.
Okay, Evan can help you with that, Laura. We can talk about that for that particular situation. Let's see, we work with Middle Eastern participants. How should we categorize? So typically, I believe Middle Eastern participants are categorized as white, correct? Yeah. So I believe in terms of race, and Jessie, do you guys have that same question before? As far as I know, I believe in terms of race, for the most part, Middle Eastern participants are classified as white.
I think that's more a protocol thing.
Okay.
I could see it also being Asian, so it's really whatever you guys want them to, how you want that to be coded.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Another question. I have the same question on implementing a program for youth at a setting like a Boys and Girls Club. These participants are from different schools. Do we need to collect demographic information? My understanding is that for youth, we do not use the data card.
That's kind of the same question that Laura had about multiple schools. I can help you come up with a workaround for that. If people have issues where they have multiple schools going into a setting, then they can contact me and I can help them with those events.
Okay, and again, we'll have the contact information at the end. So for Kenya, if you want to contact Evan about that, he can help you with that. Let's see, another question about workshop series. We often have different number of participants and demographic information at each workshop within the series. Have you guys dealt with that before in terms of?
Have we? Or?
Yeah, or I'm asking Evan or Barbara
Okay.
and Jennifer also.
So if there's a series, certainly people can join like in the second of the class series. So, you know, we're always doing is just sort of adding that additional information, but that you just end up at the end having a unique unduplicate count of participants, and then you aggregate all that demographic information, each person once.
Yeah.
Yes, so if you've entered the first session and you're going to go back and add the second session in, then you can add the new participants that you did not count in the first session. You can add them on top of all your other demographic information. So like on the screen now, it's 10 female and 15 males in the 15-17. Let's say you had another 2 unique participants in the second session, you can always update the data information on the demographic page to reflect new participants that come in.
Thank you. There's another question about, is there going to be an FAQ for how to fill out the PEARS information required? So I mentioned that we're going to have we're going to pull together some documents of places where we have specific guidelines that we want people to follow to have consistency across the agencies in California. We'll pull those together into documents around like the page that I told you about with the SNAP-Ed custom data page. We'll have guidelines around that. We will try to pull together an FAQ that answers some of the questions that were raised here in the webinars and some other questions that may be important for you for filling out the PEARS information. Jesse will also go over some help features that are available that will help you and help guide you through the information that should be entered into the PEARS system that's sort of generic, if you will, for all users in all states for PEARS, because PEARS is used in, what is it now? Is it close to 15 states? Is
18.
That right? How many?
18, actually. 18.
Yeah. So 18 states. So there are lots of common questions that are just about how to use the PEARS system in general, and Jesse will show you some of those resources. But for anything that's California specific, we will put that together in the materials that would be available to you. And I think I missed some questions in the chat, so I'm going to go over there. I was answering the Q&A, so let me go over the chat.
Lauren, this is Barbara. Let me just add one thing. I mean,
Sure.
We all know it's quite difficult, this reporting on the race, ethnicity. So since so many questions are coming up, I think, you know, these are really federal guidelines and definitions. So there might be some federal definitions we can be able to refer folks to as another example of resources to help people.
Thank you. That's great. Sorry, I'm trying to go back and see where we left off in the chat. Again, I think maybe Barbara was pointing to some of these questions, such as ethnicity question. If someone is mixed Hispanic and non-Hispanic, does their true ethnicity, which is mixed, not get recorded, and what should someone input? In the past,
They would just be part Hispanic at that point.
Yeah.
And then they would go into the Hispanic and Latino.
So I mean, if they indicate that they are Hispanic, then they would get counted under Hispanic. So they would get counted in that way. They wouldn't necessarily get counted as mixed ethnicity, but they would get counted because they are Hispanic. So that you would count them there. Another question, a series of adult class. Is each listed separately, or do we add each class to screen number 1, different number at each class? I think we just addressed that right now, so I think you had an answer to that. So you would just put the overall number on that first page, the overall number of unduplicated attendance over the whole series in that first page. And then, oh, Dawn just mentioned that most public housing and youth programs have been able to provide us with data card info for the kids. The sites often collect it for other purposes. So if there are sessions and things that you're doing in youth programs that involve children from multiple schools, you may be able to get the information for the demographic section from those programs who are collecting it for other reasons. So thank you, Dawn, for that. So if we do 6 sessions, we should have data cards filled out until that 6th day if new participants attended. So
We do 6.
hold on, we're reviewing. Yeah, so I think if there were new people attending, so if somebody new came at the 2nd session, then you would want to have a data card filled out for that new person. So you can always update the information in pairs if you need to. It doesn't, what you put in initially doesn't have to be your final answer or your final reporting. Okay. I think I don't see anything else new. I know there are lots of questions about this section, and it is new because the requirements for the EARS form changed. So I know there are lots of questions. We'll do all we can to make sure that we get as much information out there to you. And please just remember that we're always available. So if you have specific questions as you're moving forward and start to work on that, you can get support from your agency about how to complete the demographics section. And the PEARS folks too, the PEARS team will also be available for help with that.
And just to note that we have a question that says, how can you be non-Hispanic / Latino? That's non-Hispanic / non-Latino. So it's not non-Hispanic and then Latino as well. Just a wording issue.
Oh. Okay, so I think we can go on then.
Sounds good. All right. Well, now that we've wrapped that up, we will save and continue and move on to the attached survey instruments section. So not all of you will do this, and if you are not using survey instruments, then you're just going to click No Survey Instruments to Report, and then you can move on. However, if you end up using them at some point, you are going to click Attach Survey Instrument, and this is where you're going to find the survey instrument that you created over here in the Plan menu. So as you look here and you click there, a list is going to populate of all the survey instruments that you have available to you. So you'll choose the one you want, and then you'll get to choose a type, whether it was a pre, post, follow-up, or retrospective survey. And so this allows you to use the same survey instrument and attach it multiple times. You could attach it once as a pre-survey and once as a post. Then you're not creating them multiple times. You're going to choose the date that you delivered it. And if you want to, you can rename it. You could add the date if that's helpful for you or whatever makes sense to you. And then you're going to save it. And now, as you see, we have one survey instrument attached here. And if you go under the actions, you'll see that this button on the left side is where you enter response data. So you click there, and now all of these form fields are fillable, and you don't have to fill out everything. None of these are going to be required, so you want to make sure that you do get every question that was answered. But we realize that some people are not going to answer all questions, and so that's why they're not all required. So you enter what information you have, and then you just click Add. And now you'll see there's a 1 up here. That is for our first survey instrument. So after you click Add, it gives you another blank form to fill out. But if you need to, you can go back to that first one if there's something you have to update, and you'll see there are the answers that we put in for the first one. So if you need to, you can update them, and you'll just want to make sure that at the end you click Update so that your changes will save. From there, you can also choose to delete a survey if for whatever reason you need to delete it, or you can choose to go back to survey instruments. So that's where we'll go. You know, as I said before, you can attach multiple survey instruments, so you could decide you need a post one too, and just go through the same process. Next, you'll want to, once you've finished entering, oh, I'm sorry, I guess if you have anything to add, Lauren, before we finish up?
No, I didn't have anything else to add to this, nope.
Okay, great. So after you've entered any survey instruments and their response data, you're going to want to mark it as complete. So what that's going to do is let your administrators know that you've entered all the data for your program, everything is finished, and you're ready for this to be included in reports. Now, once you mark it as complete, you're not going to be able to edit it unless you mark it as incomplete again. We want to make sure that there are some safeguards from to keep your data from being edited once you have finished entering it. So if you had a survey or a data card that you found in the bottom of your bag and you forgot to enter it and you need to enter it, you just go mark as incomplete. And now all of these sections are clickable again, and you can go add whatever you need to, and just make sure that you save your changes before you mark it as complete again. So that's going to conclude program activities. Do we want to stop for some questions?
Sure. It looks like there's a few other questions, so maybe we can go over those real quickly before we move on. So there was one question overall about, is there still the CalFresh yes/no questions?
And we are no longer required to report on the CalFresh status of the participants, so we're no longer asking that question on the data card or reporting it into the system.
Thank you, Evan. So the next question, are we entering every single one of the surveys that we collect? So again, I mentioned earlier in the webinar that that UC CalFresh folks, for example, are entering data for the food behavior checklist and Plan, Shop, Save, Cook. And for those, yes, in fact, you would enter every single survey that you collect would be entered into the PEARS system. So I think somebody else asked a question, if we get 25 surveys from a class, do we need to do this 25 times? So yes, essentially, and Jesse, maybe you want to talk more about this too, but essentially this is a way to do data entry for your surveys. So if you enter them into here, you will also have the option to export an Excel file. And I think, Jesse, you're going to talk about that later, right?
Yes, yeah. That's going to be under the Analyze tab up here, but we do have a way to export all that data. And I just want to touch on, too, depending on the surveys that you're using, some of those do allow for aggregate data entry. If they don't allow for it, then you will have to enter them each 25 times for a class with 25 surveys. But if the survey allows for aggregate data entry, when you're entering the data, it will look different. You'll be able to put in numbers instead of just choosing, to hit the button that says for each one. So you'll be able to mark that if it's an option. Another thing, too, is that later on this year, we are planning to upgrade our survey system, and part of that is going to be a link that you can send out to your participants to fill out the survey so that you don't have to fill all of these out. So this is something that we are in the process of reworking, but for now, this is the way the system works.
And I just want to remind those of you from the beginning that I had mentioned that we are still making a final determination in California about using the survey. So aside from the 2 surveys that UC CalFresh are piloting this year, we are still deciding, the other SIAs are still discussing the extent to which we will ask people to enter survey data. So for right now, I mentioned before that for impact outcome evaluation, it is not required for you to enter this into the PEARS system. You can continue to use the data entry template that you were provided for the impact outcome evaluation for CDPH, for example. So again, you're not required to enter those surveys in right now.
And Lauren, if I can just add, so since it is a new system for us, for UC CalFresh, because we are going to try those 2 pre-post surveys, we'll have a separate training so that our people can actually kind of practice it and sort of review that we're not going to add any additional questions, for example, since they're all IRB approved surveys.
Thank you, Barbara. That's great. Okay, so I think we answered There was a question about what if the curriculum itself has an evaluation included? How can we mark that? So I think that for like some specific criteria, or sorry, for some specific curriculum, they're not on the evaluation tools are not listed here, and so there's not an opportunity for entering that kind of information. I think that in California there were specific instruments that were given to the PEARS team to add to the list, and so if you don't see it there, it's not included right now in the PEARS system for data entry. Let's see, somebody else asked, how soon can we get the new data cards we are implementing for year 2 already, and I'm using the same data cards from year 1? They're ready now, right?
Yeah.
They are ready now, so Evan can send those out to you. That was Kenya Fuentes.
And just for UC CalFresh, just ours are posted right now.
And is it still required to use the ATF? No, we are not. We are no longer using the ATF. So there is no additional data entry or information entered into the ATF starting now, right now. So for FFY 2018.
Unless you have FFY 17 things that still need entering.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So you can still use it if you have 2017, but for 2018, please do not use the ATF. Let's see, I think I answered, there's some questions in the chat. If we collect survey data, is there a way to import data from Excel versus, yes. So yes, so I was mentioning that you'll be able to get an Excel file. That's what you were asking. If I'm not right, let me know. It says if we collect survey data, is there a way to import data from Excel versus enter it all over again? So yes, you'd be able to export an Excel data file.
I just want to clarify too, we can't import data from an Excel file for survey instruments.
Oh,
but I just did, yeah. So yep, if you have that data in an Excel file and you're going to be it's something that will be entered in PEARS, then it will have to be entered all over again right now. But it can, all the data can be exported, and I'll show you how to do that later.
Thank you, Jessie. I read that backwards, so yes, thanks. Let's see, another question for state audits. What local supporting documentation do we need to keep in our files with regards to data cards? Only one data card per unduplicated person reached? Thanks, Dawn. That's actually a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I am happy to explore that and include that in our document when we answer some questions. Or I don't know if anybody else from any of the other agencies knows the answer to that. Okay, well, we'll make sure, Dawn, that we address that question and respond to that. Another question, are the new data cards translated into Spanish? I only have an English version.
There's English and Spanish only right now, and we're working on Vietnamese, Chinese, and then if you need any other language translations, please request it as soon as possible, because it takes a while to go through the channels.
Thank you. Are we able to enter data from October 2017 as it is part of FFY 2018? Yes. You may enter that into the PEARS system. Yeah, we work on the federal fiscal year, so data entry from October 1st through September 30th of 2018 can be entered for this reporting period. Thank you. Let's see, another question. Since we are not using the ATF anymore, is there a printout of the new data our health educators should be filling out during the workshops, or do we have to, print out the SNAP-Ed custom data, demographics, et cetera, on the PEARS webpage?
It's part of the data event card I'm making.
Oh, okay.
So we'll have a cheat sheet.
Okay, so Evan says that he's creating a cheat sheet for that. So we will have that to add to the materials. Someone asks if they have more questions, who can we reach out to? And I will give contact information at the end. I have some slides that I'm going to show at the very end, and so I will have that contact information. But basically, it would be your SIA contact that you would normally contact for questions about the ATF in the past. It would be those same folks.
And sorry, I was just going to add that at the end, I will give people the contact information for the PEARS support team too. So if you have questions that aren't necessarily specific to California and are just more system-based, you can reach out to us from 8 to 5 Central Time every weekday.
Great, thank you. Let's see, another question, are data cards required to fill out for all classes for adults?
If you have a multi-session class, you would just need to give the data cards out to the people the first time that they participate. So the first class you would hand out the data cards to, but if you have 3 or 4 more classes in that same session for the curricula, then you wouldn't need to hand out data cards again for each of the subsequent sessions. If any new people come, you would need to give them data cards, but you no longer have to hand them out at every session as long as you reported them at least or got their demographics at least once during those sessions, and you report all of those sessions within the same program activity.
Great. I think that answers both the 2 questions that were there. So another question came in similarly, are data cards required to fill out if there was a workshop series? And so that, I think Evan just answered that question also. And then as a follow-up of entering data from October 2017, does that mean those classes will count towards FFY 2018 objectives? Yes. As Jesse said, we're working on the federal fiscal year, which began October 1st for FFY 18.
All right. Are you ready to move on? It looks like, oh, well, one more question just came in. Pre and post would be entered under the same program activity. So let me go back here. When you're attaching your survey instruments, you're going to want both of those to be associated with the same program activities. So you will just attach it again and specify the type and the date that you delivered, and then you'll see that you have them both listed here. You can attach as many survey instruments as you gave to your during your program activity. So if you gave one at the beginning and one at the end, you can attach both of those, and that you're going to want all of that data to be associated with the same group of people, right? You wouldn't want to have to enter that demographic information all over again. So I think that answers that.
Looks like there's one other question. Someone who is new to SNAP-Ed, where do I access the data cards? Is it, so Evan can send those out if you are CDPH from one of the local health departments. Barbara McNelly said that they are available on the UC CalFresh website. If you are from one of the other state implementing agencies, I think, Evan, are they getting those directly from their agencies? I think that you would get those directly from your agency representative. And again, I'll have those contact names at the end of the slides. Another question, are data cards required for all participants regardless of age? If a participant attended multiple activities, do we have to get their data card info for each activity?
Yes, we would like the data cards for all participants. Sometimes if there's young kids without their parents, people feel uncomfortable asking them for their demographic information. And in that case, you would just need to mark down, tally up their genders and age ranges, and then report them into the demographic section. And then if a participant attended multiple activities, do we have to get their card for each activity. If it's for the same direct ed event and there's just multiple different types going on at that same event, you would only need to collect their demographic information once. If the participant is attending multiple activities over the course of the year, then you would want to collect their demographic information at every event over the course of the year. So if the multiple activities are tied with the same curricula, the same program activity, you would only need to collect their data once. If it's
like completely different.
If they participated in different activities at different settings with different curricula, you would need to collect their information every time.
There's another question asking, do you have to match the surveys?
Yeah, you're not going to choose like this is the pre and this is the attached post. You're just going to attach them to the program activity, and you could choose to name them something similar so that you know that they go together. But on the export, I'll show you how you'll see them. I'll enter one more response, and then it'll make more sense once I show you how you export the data. So no, you won't have to match them. Just make sure they're attached to the program activity they're associated with.
Great. And then just a comment about a question from before. Elisa posted that the data cards are posted on the Catholic Charities SNAP-Ed website also. So you can get those, for those of you who are funded through Catholic Charities, you can also find the data cards on your website. Okay. All right.
Okay. We ready to move on?
I think we are.
Okay, wonderful. All right, now we have finished our program activity, and we're going to move on to success stories. So a lot of places in the site, you can only see your data or data that others have given you access to. However, success stories is different. We assume that you want to share your successes, see what's working for others, and share how that's helping what's working for you. So you're going to be able to see success stories for everyone in your organization. And you can filter that down. You could filter it based on the indicator that you're looking at, different approaches, things like that. You could look for a specific user. So if you want to do that, that's a good way to kind of see what worked for them. So we will start by adding our own success story. And you have the ability to attach it to a program activity. So if you click program, you can choose the activity it's attached to. It doesn't have to be, that's not a required field. So if it's just a general success story, or if it, is a success story at a site and isn't really specific to a program activity, you don't have to do that. But one thing that will happen is your unit will pre-populate if you choose a program that it's linked to. It'll populate with the same unit from that program. Next, you'll choose a title. And again, that's just whatever makes sense to you to tell it apart. And then you'll write some background. So you can include, things like the curricula you used, sessions, partnerships involved, things like that. Next, you'll have your body, and this will just tell a little bit more about the impact that your program had, and some details, observations, testimonials, things like that. And next, you have the option of adding your favorite quote, and that's something that's going to show up. Again, it'll show up on a couple different reports. I'll show you where later, but it's not required, but it can be helpful when you're showing these to stakeholders. If you were to take this to some legislators and say, look at the impact we're having, look at this quote from our participant, it's straight from the horse's mouth. So this is a great place to add that information. Next, you have the option to add some keywords. So you can choose some things that your success story was related to. So you can type in and you'll start to see some. And this is going to be something that can be useful when searching for your success story. So, you know, it's kind of like when you're searching on the internet, you use keywords. So you want to be able to tag some keywords that go along with your success story if others are looking for similar things. So whatever makes sense here, you can tag as many as you want. Next, that related framework indicators. If you choose a program activity it's related to, it's going to pull those in. However, you have the option to add additional. And if you didn't choose your program activity that it was related to, you'll be able to just choose this from a blank slate. So you'll also add the socio-ecological frameworks that you're targeting and any approaches that you're targeting. Now, at the bottom here, you will have the option to add some files. So you can attach things like photos. You could attach some related worksheets or something that you gave out that were related to this. The only thing is right now you can't attach video, but we are working on that. So, and then you're just going to click create once you have filled this all out. And you can see there's our success story. And from this overview page, you have the option to click here on the associated program activity, and it'll take you back to that. So, Lauren, do you have any additional thoughts on success stories?
Sure, just a couple of things. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing, sorry. So for the success stories right now, there aren't any specific guidelines about, or we're still working on more specific guidelines about this from each of the SIAs. So there may be more specific instructions from your state implementing agency about how to use the success story feature. I don't know if Barbara or anybody else wants to add for other agencies, but I'll just mention right now at CDPH, we will be asking you to enter at least one throughout the year, and we're, along with those documents that we were talking about before, sort of in your package of helpful information for entering into PEARS, we will be providing additional instructions for the specific sections in the PEARS form. So under the body, for example, we're going to be providing some additional instructions about what to include in the body of the success story. And know that we're also working on another template for something that would be a template that you might use that's more public facing for handing out to stakeholders or for legislators or something like that. So we would really encourage you to use the features around adding pictures and adding quotes. I think those are really important. Jesse mentioned that. I think that's really important, and people love to see that along with success stories. So we encourage you, but just know that there will be some additional information about success stories from the individual state implementing agencies. And there was, just to add, there was a question asked about whether this would take the place of the success story at the end of the fiscal year. And for CDPH for 2018, yes, more than likely this will take the place of the success story at the end of the fiscal year, but again, we'll have some additional instructions to help support that. I don't know, Barbara, if you guys want to add anything or if anybody else wants to add anything from the other agencies. Okay, I think we're good. Oh.
Should we mention that there's no statistical tests being run on the survey?
Yeah, there was a question about matching. So this goes back, sorry, from the success stories, but goes back to a question about matching the survey. And I think I'll just want to point out, and Jesse had said this, or maybe I don't remember if we said it explicitly, but for right now, the way in entering pre and post-test surveys, there is not a mechanism for doing testing of pre-post differences, so statistical testing on pre-post, and that's why there's not really a matching person to person, right? There's Jesse, there's not a field for an ID number, right?
Actually, we can include that. It depends on the templates that were sent, but we do have a unique identifier field that can be added to any. So that is one way that you could match them. It'll be something that's on the survey, but again, not every survey template is going to have that. So it's really up to you guys if you want to use that field, but it'll show up on the exports if there are personal identifying numbers, and so you could match them that way in your Excel file.
Wow. But right now, but just for folks, for example, who use the data entry template, for example, for impact outcome evaluation, and how that that data entry template calculates the difference between pre-post and gives you a statistical test. Right now, entering into pairs, that is not an option right now for those that are entered into pairs. So you could enter, if we made it available, we could enter ID numbers, but again, you would have to take that Excel file, export it, and do statistical tests on that separately.
Right, right. And that may change as we rework our system, but
for
yeah,
right now, that's the case.
Exactly.
There's a question about, for quotes, do you want us to translate the Spanish quotes to English? If that was a possibility, I think that would be great, maybe to put them both in Spanish and English. If that was a possibility, I think that would be amazing. And I think that's all I have, and I don't see any other questions right now, so.
Okay. One last thing before we go, if you go back to the main success stories section, there is an option to use a word cloud. And so anything that you've entered throughout the year will be included in this word cloud. So I've used these different keywords, and as you add more success stories and different ones, that will change, and you can download this and include the graphic other places, and the words will get bigger based on how many times the keyword has been used. You can also filter it down so that it's not just you. It could be maybe you're looking for everything related to healthy eating. Then you're going to see a different kind of word cloud. So that can be used different ways. And so that's just one other feature that's kind of neat that you can use here. And one other thing I want to point out is that, as you just saw, I'm using these breadcrumbs up here. I don't think I explained those. So these are a way to get back to the previous, like a larger section. So we're within the track menu, and within that track menu, we've gone to success stories, and from there, we're using our word cloud. So if we click on these links, we can kind of find our way back. So if I want to just go back to success stories, I can click on that link, and if I want to go to the greater track menu, I can click there. So it's kind of a nice way to keep track of where you're at within the site. So now that we've finished our success stories, I'm going to move on to indirect activities. And so we'll just want to create an indirect activity, and you can choose a title. So maybe we're doing a monthly newsletter. We can add that here. Then you will want to choose the intervention that it's related to, and the unit that it's taking place at. Now, if you have a date range for your activity, you'll want to use it. However, this isn't a required field, so if you don't have that, that's okay. Next, you're going to want to choose the intervention channel and reach. So if this is a standalone indirect activity, then you're going to want to enter your estimated number reached and the support and the source of your data. However, if it's being used in conjunction with a program activity and you've already recorded demographic information there, we're asking that you just put 0 in for your estimated number reached, since we're already assuming that those participants have been reached and counted in your program activity demographic information. So if you, let's say you have a monthly newsletter that you're giving out to kids in a classroom. You've already counted those kids in the classroom, but you're sending this newsletter home for their parents. So maybe there were 25 kids in the classroom, and you want to count their parents as at least one person at home would be reached, right? So we're going to include that here, and let's see, include the source of data. And this is part of the EARS form. So even if you've already counted participants, we still need you to add a 0 and the source of your data so that we're getting that intervention channel, because that is going to be pulled into part of the EARS form. Then you'll want to choose any materials that you used and create that. So I don't know if, Lauren, you have any additional, anything to add here?
I think the only thing I was going to add was just remember that when we were talking about the program activities, I had said that if there were materials and resources that you used in conjunction with that direct activity, that direct education, that you listed under other approved materials like the Rethink Your Drink, fact sheets, and things like that, that you would put that in with the direct ed activity. If you reported it there, we would ask that you not report it again here. Okay. So again, if it was something that you already did over there, and again, Jesse just explained about not putting any more reach here if you've already reported it anyway. But again, if you listed it under other materials and it was in conjunction with the same students, for example, or the same people that you did the direct ed, then you wouldn't enter it again in the indirect ed. So I think that was the only thing I wanted to add there.
Okay.
Yeah. I think there was one other, can I go back to one other question? There was one question about the pre-post surveys that we collect. It says, so just to clarify, we will be entering all pre-post surveys that we collect. No, that's not necessarily correct. So if you are not with UC CalFresh and not using the 2 surveys that I mentioned, you do not need to enter pre-post surveys into the PEARS system right now. That I mentioned that there are still some things that we are discussing as a larger, at the state level, and we're going to discuss that some more. But for right now, you do not have to enter pre-post surveys.
And I think I can answer the next one about the example. Sure. So the reason why you want 0 for those students, it's not going to be entered in a different intervention channel. That would be entered, you're using the same intervention channel. It's all an article. So you have 25 for the additional parents reached and 0 for the students. So, and again, it sounds like California is going to use a different protocol where if you are using other materials that are related to a program activity, you're not going to enter them here. So that may be easier to remember, is just to make sure that you're not duplicating your reach anywhere. If you are entering this as part of a program activity and it's related to that, then don't enter it here, and then that should work out. So you just want to make sure that you are entering it in the intervention channel that it belongs with, because we have to have that field collected. So I hope that
thank you. I think that's helpful. So yeah, we really, I mean, really the indirect should be, well, I was going to say a standalone event. So in a way it is a standalone event, but if you were sending out newsletters or something to parents, and it wasn't part of the direct ed activity reaching those students, then you could enter that in this section. So I think that somebody asked, can you use approved fact sheets such as Rethink Your Drink or Harvest of the Month in an indirect education lesson? I think that if they were used in conjunction with a direct ed and reaching those students, for example, you would want to put that in the other approved materials list in the program activity section as opposed to in the indirect section. There is another question. If we have regular Facebook posts reporting on events, new research, highlights of school classroom participants, how do we report that? Each post individually or a sum of monthly posts? Jesse, do you have feedback on how that's been used?
I don't. I know that you can see the reach on those posts, but yeah, I don't know that there is. I mean, you can see the reach for your social media posts, and so, I mean, you could count all of that up for. I don't know if you would do it individually. I guess it would depend on whether or not those posts are related. So.
And also, you can put a range, if you scroll up a little bit, you can put a range, a date range for that. So if you were doing something and it was a similar content, you could put a range up there, and if your intervention name is like a Facebook post around specific topic, you could put a range up there and then enter the estimated number that were reached through that. I hope that's helpful. If not, we can try to address that again if that wasn't, if that didn't answer your question. There's another question for monthly harvest of the month newsletter sent to all parents at a school independent of direct ed. Can we enter once for the year? That's a good question. I would think, given that there's a start and end date, if it's just one, like harvest of the month, so if you went to the top and if harvest of the month, like monthly newsletter was your activity, your indirect activity, you could put the start and end date of the school year, for example, and then how many were reached with that newsletter. So yes, I would say you could do that.
And then I see a question, is there a site drop-down menu for direct ed activities? Right now, no. There is the unit. If you wanted to, you could include the site in your title, but right now we don't map indirect activities to a particular site.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. I think we got everything. Yes, we got everything. And don't forget, we are going to be going back. We're going to get a printout of the log of chat questions and Q&A. So we will make sure that if we didn't address something fully, or if you have additional questions, we will try to make sure that we're addressing all of your questions. Let me see if I missed anything. It looks like there's. So if we had a weekly, monthly theme for a topic, we could sum the total of contacts reached or use the number of followers. Yes. Yes, that would be right. And someone had a question, how is indirect education defined now? I don't know, Jesse, do you guys have the USDA? I don't have it right in front of me for the USDA indirect education definition right now. Do you have it?
I can pull it up. I don't have it.
Okay. Well,
right
or we can, Daisy, we'll make sure that we get you that definition and post it in with our materials. You can look at the, I think that under the, on the USDA website, there are some FAQs and some questions, some answers to some of those questions about that, but we'll make sure we get that and post that.
Yeah, Lauren, I actually have it up here.
Oh, what's that?
This is Joel. I got the definition up from the PEARS glossary. It says indirect education for SNAP-Ed purposes is defined as the distribution or display of information and resources, including any mass communications, public events, such as health fairs, and materials distribution which involve no participant interaction with an instructor of multimedia. Distribution of educational materials alone does not constitute an evidence-based intervention. Indirect activities, education activities, or distribution of educational materials through indirect intervention channels needs to take place within an evidence-based intervention. So I'll post that there in the Q&A, but that's what's listed as indirect education for the EARS report.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Oh, which one?
Oh, it's in the chat.
Oh, I think, or did Jesse, did you already answer that? There was a question about, is there a site drop-down menu for indirect ed activities? And no, I think, oh, go ahead.
But for the second portion of the question, it's asking about classes without data cards at a church. Previously, we were instructed by the USDA that if you couldn't collect demographic information, then you would list that as an indirect class. Moving forward, if it's a direct education class and you couldn't get any of the demographic information, you would still put it under the program activities like you would all of the other direct ed activities. But what you would have to do is make an estimate of their age ranges. So if it's an adult class, you could probably put them all in the 18 to 59 category. And if you can't count the gender breakouts, then you would put them all in unknown. If you did not get any information as to their demographics or no information on participants, then you can leave the demographics page blank. But so for moving forward, if there's a direct education class without demographic information, you won't be reporting that as indirect anymore. You'll still put that in the program activity section, just like if you did collect all the demographic information.
Great, thanks, Evan, for that clarification. That's really helpful. I think there's another question. Are we no longer going to track non-target?
That's the meeting.
Oh,
Train the trainers.
Oh, so meetings and train the trainers. So I think there are some, under the partnership section that Jesse will get to, there are some opportunities to track meetings and events, and we can look at that, but we are not specifically tracking non-target activities any longer. Another question, if several different schools did a school health fair, do we just tally the total number reached for all health fairs? If they're separate indirect activities, then you could do a separate entry for each one. Or do you mean, I'm not sure if the question means that there was one health fair and multiple schools participated, or Evan, do you have anything?
If you had like health fairs across multiple campuses, across all the campuses in the district, then you would just list as one indirect activity, and then sum up all of the participants as a community event or fair.
Okay. That's even if they were in multiple locations? Oh, that's right, because they're not tied to locations. Okay, so if you had multiple health fairs, like on a school health fair day or something like that, then you could add them all together.
As long as they're the same type of health fair.
Right.
Like if they're all doing a Be Better type food day demonstration on the same day across all of the campuses, then you would list them as ones. But if they're separate health fairs covering separate topics over different days, then you would just list them separately.
Right. Okay, let's see if there are more. Right, so if there's a health fair at a specific school, you don't need to indicate the site. So no, right now, indirect activity is not tied to a specific site.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking through the questions. Are the training of trainers considered non-target activity? What is the definition of non-target activity?
So non-target activities are activities that you conduct as part of your scope of work or integrated work plan that are not not part of interventions towards the SNAP-Ed target audience. So if you're having stakeholder meetings, or if you're going to a training, or let's say you're listening in on a state webinar like this one, then this used to be considered a non-target event that you would have entered in. But as for right now, there's no mechanism for reporting all of those types of things.
And I'll just mention, as I said, when we get to the partnership section and Jesse shows you the meetings section, there may be some places where things like that could be entered. Also remember that there also is a place where you mark training, whether or not you did some training in the PSE section. We're not reviewing the PSE section today, but if there were some trainings related to your policy system and environmental change type interventions, there's also a place to mark off whether trainings occurred there. You don't have to mark in the details of it, but there is a place to indicate that those trainings took place there also. Okay, I think we got all of these questions. I think we got all the questions in the question and answer, so I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, wonderful. We are now going to move on to partnerships, so I'll be able to show you that meetings and events section. And partnerships has some cool features, so you'll be able to see that there are a lot more links here. Since this is such a new module, we wanted to give people a lot of resources to help figure out what should go here. And so rather than write something up ourselves, we have links to the SNAP-Ed toolkit, and you can see read the background and context and how to measure things and get that official guidance. You can also click on the read more link here, and I'll let you read that later, but it gives you more information about what constitutes a partnership. And so, and then if you have something that is a multi-sector partnership, you're not going to be reporting it in the partnerships form. We actually have coalitions for that. So we'll start off by creating a partnership, and we will give that partnership a name. And then we will choose the site where the partner is located, not necessarily where you are located. Then you'll choose your unit and the type of partnership. So what kind of a meeting is it? And you can go through this list and see more. Next, you'll choose the assistance received from the partner, and you will have the opportunity to choose multiple. Then you'll choose the assistance provided to that partner by you. And again, you have the option of choosing multiple options. And then you choose whether or not the partner receives any direct SNAP-Ed funding. So we'll need to track whether or not they do. And any intervention types that the partner is involved in for the reporting year, you're going to want to choose here. So if they help with program activities and direct education, you'll choose that. If they are a part of your social marketing campaigns, you can choose that. And the same for PSE. So anything this partner is working with you on, you'll want to choose that here. So then we will save and continue. And we'll move on to the evaluation section. So this is where you can evaluate how the partnership is going. And if you look, we have a link here that lists some helpful evaluation tools for evaluating partnerships and coalitions. So you can read a short description, you can get links to those evaluation tools, and you can see all of those here. So you can choose the depth of the relationship and there are there's an outline of what constitutes those different depths in the evaluation interpretive guide, and when you click there, you'll get a short description with all of this. So you want to make sure that you're clicking on all these different links, because we've tried to walk you through it as much as we can. So once you have chosen the depth of your relationship, next you'll choose an assessment tool. And if you didn't do an assessment on your partnership, you can choose none. However, if you have, you can choose one of the approved assessment tools, or you can choose other, and then you can give the name of the other tool and a brief description of the results. If you choose an assessment tool that is recommended, you won't have to name it, but you will still have to give a brief description of the results and any accomplishments for your partnership for the current reporting period. Now, we realize you may have partners you've been working with for years, but we don't want to list everything for every other reporting period, just what has happened from October 1st of this year to September 30th of 2018. Next, you will describe any of the lessons that you've learned while you've been working in this partnership. So barriers or challenges, things that you can reflect on later and think of, you know, what was hard here, what can we do better? So that's where you will list that. Next, we will save and continue. And this is the section that Lauren was talking about, where you have the option to add meetings and events. So if you've been meeting with a partner or an organization that you're partnering with, you can report those meetings here. And for every meeting or event, you click this Add Meeting Event button, and then you'll be able to choose the name and the date for that meeting, the time that meeting started, the purpose, why were you meeting, and any notes or accomplishments from the meeting or event. It could be a meeting or an event. You can log both here. So, and again, this is all the meetings and events that happen for this current reporting period. Now, if you're not tracking these things, you can just report no, and you don't have to do any of that. But since we had that, we go back to yes, and there is our meeting. And that is really all you have to do for the partnerships module. So we'll go ahead and mark that as complete. And because we know that partnerships, they usually last for several years. So we have a way where you can copy partnerships from the previous reporting period. So if you have any, I didn't have any partnerships for California for last year, but we do have that option. So you won't have to keep entering the same partnership over and over again. You'll be able to copy those from year to year and then just change the relevant information. So that's my overview on partnerships. Lauren, do you have some things to add?
I didn't have anything specific to add, but it looks like we had a couple of questions, so maybe we can go ahead and address those questions now, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, so let's see. For healthy retail, can we include the stores or youth groups as partners? Are there evaluation tools for specific groups? I think that whoever you are, for healthy retail, you would include the store as a partner. So for example, if you were working, with several stores, I would include those stores as your partners. And if youth groups are working with you as partners, I would definitely include those here. In terms of evaluation tools, I know there's a link to several kinds of evaluation tools that are available, and you could look those over. If you don't see one that looks relevant, like for example, I don't see one that's like a specific like partnership evaluation if you're working specifically in retail, for example. But if you don't find one that looks like, if you'd like to do some kind of partnership evaluation and you don't see a tool there, then certainly feel free to contact the evaluation team at your state implementing agencies, and we can help you think about other tools that might be available. Let's see, another question. Are we required to report on each partnership separately for the federal fiscal year, or is there a minimum number of partnerships we have to report on? There's not a minimum number. I think I would just report each of the relevant partnerships that you have. But yes, I would think that they need to be, and Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, that they are entered separately. So each partnership is entered separately.
Right. Now, the one caveat to that is if you have several partners that are all working together, then that might actually be a coalition. If you have several different sectors of influence that are working together and you're all working towards the same goals, then we'll talk more about that in the coalitions module. But if it's just a partner and you are just working with that partner, you're going to want to enter each one of those separately.
Great, thank you. Let's see if there's any more partnership questions. Do phone conferences count? I mean, so the meeting and event section is really there mostly for your benefit. It's not required for the EARS form, and so that's really there for your benefit. So, I mean, certainly we would look at those, but it's not required information for the EARS form. So I would say that if you want to include those, you could. I don't know, Evan, if you have any other thoughts on that or if anybody else does, but I would say include those if you would like to. If you meet throughout the year but are reporting quarterly, do you mark complete, then incomplete, and add more data? I think that's really up to you. You could just leave that incomplete and then go back and mark it as complete at the very end of the year. But you know, you also could mark it quarterly. I'm not sure, Jesse, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. I don't know that that matters tremendously about whether you mark it as complete or incomplete quarterly.
It doesn't. It really is just there to kind of let others know that you're done reporting on it. So, and also, let me see here if in our filter. So one other thing is towards the end of the reporting period, if you know that you're going to be entering more data for it later, you could just leave it incomplete, and then at the end of the reporting period, use your filters and just check this not completed, and then you'll be able to see anything that you need to finish up before the end of the year. So I guess it's really a personal decision. We don't ask that anything, you know, we work on the federal fiscal year, so however you do your reporting is kind of organizational based, but marking as complete or incomplete, it really just lets others know that you've finished your data entry. So I don't know if that helped, but.
No, that's helpful, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I don't see any other partnership questions, so.
Oh, I do see one. It says that in the past you tried not to list the sites as partners. That's in the chat if you want to answer that.
Dawn, that's a great question. So there's a question that says, in the past we tried not to list the sites as partners to avoid a lot of data entry. Do you now want grocery stores, work sites, churches, etc.? Dawn, that is a great question, and I'm going to not answer it completely, because I think that's a question that I would think that the work group needs, our evaluation work group would like to talk about some more. The actual definition of a partnership in the SNAP-Ed evaluation framework says that it's 2 or more people working together in a particular site or a particular intervention. So in fact, that does seem to be saying that if it was a local health department, for example, working with a store owner, that you would in fact be partners and have a partnership. but we wanted to clarify that a little bit more. So I'm going to hold off just a little bit on a final answer on that and say that we'd like to discuss that a little more in our evaluation work group and have a more definitive answer for you shortly. Thanks for asking that, though, and bringing that up, because that's a great question.
Okay, if that's all the questions we have for now, I will go ahead and move on to coalitions. And coalitions and partnerships are both very similar. The difference is going to be that in coalitions, it's multiple partners working together. It's a multi-sector partnership, so partners from different sectors. And you can see the different sectors if you click on that link. And this will list all of the ones that are defined in the SNAP-Ed evaluation framework. And again, you're just going to want to record things that are happening for this reporting period. So when we create our coalition, you'll choose a name. And a jurisdiction level. So is this a multi-sector partnership on the local level, state, territorial, or Commonwealth, or is it tribal? And so you'll choose that. And then you'll choose the unit where most of that's taking place. And any assistance received from the coalition. So any assistance that you are receiving from this coalition, you'll want to add here. And then any assistance that you are providing to the coalition members, you'll want to add here. And if this coalition is involved, again, in any direct education, social marketing, or PSCs, you'll add those here. As you can see, it's very similar. The only difference is this page here where we have the members in the coalition. So you'll want to record every member that's a part of your coalition. And I know that the evaluation framework says that that's at least 5 different sectors. However, we understand that you might be in the process of building a coalition. So if you don't have 5 sectors right now, maybe you only have 2 or 3 sectors that are represented, you can still add your members and work on starting to record the growth of your coalition. So you'll want to include the organization's name for your member and the sector of influence. And then you'll also want to include the type of member. And you have the option of adding the member's primary site, but if that, it's an optional field. So if there isn't a site that makes sense or an organization that you can link it to, you don't have to add that. And then you'll want to describe the member's role and the resources that they provide in particular. So on the previous page, we said what resources you're getting from the coalition as a whole. This is where you're going to state where, in particular, the resources are coming from and kind of what is this member's role here. So. Once you have added that information, you are going to click Save, and then you'll see that you have one of your members. And until you have at least 5 different sectors, you're going to get this message, and it's just letting you know how many sectors are represented here and how many partners you have as part of this. So you're able to complete it, but again, that's all that text is for. So we will save and continue. And then it's going to be the same basic thing where you're recording the depth of the relationship for the coalition, any assessment tools that were used, um, any assessment tools that were used to document the level of SNAP-Ed influence. So you have an assessment tool to document how engaged the members of your coalition are, and then you'll have a separate one to document the level of SNAP-Ed influence. And if you don't have any or you haven't done that assessment, choosing none is fine. And then you can describe any accomplishments for the reporting period. And again, just add things for the current reporting period. So, because these will be able to be copied from year to year, just like partnerships. So we'll have a record of everything that you've done, but we want to make sure that we're capturing what needs to be captured in this reporting period. So you have that option again to track your meetings and events. And like Lauren said, this is something that's really for your reference. So if it's helpful for you to have a list of everything that you've been doing as part of this coalition, you can list those here. But if you don't want to, or you rarely meet, or you're tracking it somewhere else, you can just select no, and then you can save and continue. And again, marking it as complete doesn't mean that your work in this coalition is done. It just means that you're done reporting on it for this reporting period. So once we mark that as complete, we can go back and you'll have the option to copy your coalitions. And again, I didn't have any in 2016 or 2017, so I don't have anything there, but that makes it easier. So you put in your partnerships and coalitions the one time, and from there on out, you can copy and just tweak it from year to year. So that kind of wraps up the partnerships and coalitions. Let's see if there are any other questions or anything that Lauren wants to add.
I do not have anything to add. It looks like there are a few questions. I'm a little sensitive to the fact that I know you still have stuff to cover, and we're getting close to our finishing up, so I don't want to take too much time, but just to answer real quickly, specific meetings that are part of a work plan. There was a question, do they not have to be tracked in pairs? That's correct. They do not have to be tracked in pairs. The multi-sector coalition, there was a question around, is this where you would enter information on your CNAP? And I would say yes, in the multi-sector coalition would be an appropriate place to enter information on CNAPs. There was a question I think Jesse already answered about not covering all 5 sectors. And then a question around, will chairs create their coalition within pairs? And then when members type in the coalition's name, it will show up. I don't believe that's the case, Jesse. There's not a place where someone else could populate it and then it would show up on someone else's page if there was a multi-sector coalition, correct?
No, not right now. Not currently. We're working on ways to figure out how to kind of share data and show that people are working on the same thing without having unlimited edit access. So it's something that we're thinking about, but not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There's a question that says, when you copy previous fiscal year's coalitions, will the meeting dates change automatically to the current year? The meetings wouldn't transfer, right?
No, those are not going to transfer. You'll have to, some things you're going to have to enter again, and others you're going to, like the information about your members, that can transfer. Things that are specific to a reporting period are not going to transfer, and you'll have to fill those out again. So, and you'll have the option to choose which things transfer and which things don't when you copy it. Unfortunately, I just didn't have anything entered for California for last year, so I couldn't show that. But we're always here if you have questions later on. So.
Okay, so just I know that there are a couple of more questions. Jesse, I think you still have the analyze stuff to go over.
And Right, and in that track menu, we also have the social marketing campaigns, but that's going to be something that's done on the state level. So you can see that we have it, but for time's sake, we're going to skip over it because it's really not something that you're going to use on the individual level. Is that okay, Lauren?
Yes, that's fine. And
Okay.
I'm going to apologize for the additional questions that are around coalitions and partnerships and say that we will address all of the answers to all of these questions. I just want to make sure that we cover everything before we have to end for today. So we will certainly answer all of those questions and make sure that they're available in a document that gets posted for everyone to see the answers. So thanks for all the great questions, though. You guys are really thinking, and I know there's a lot to think about. So I appreciate all the great questions, and we will definitely get to all of them.
All right. Well, with that, for time's sake, we're going to move on to the Analyze menu. This is where your reports and exports are. So under Reports, you can see your unit snapshot, and that takes a minute to pre-populate because it's pulling in a lot of different data. So give it just a second here. Still thinking about it. Okay, so here we go, and it's going to show you information for California, and you can look at totals for the amount of program activities and volunteer hours logged. You can see different tables for demographics, and you can see where things are happening and how many things are happening in different counties, and those are being mapped by site. See some of those favorite quotes that we talked about from success stories, and if you have impact data from your survey instruments, you would be able to see some pre and post comparisons. So that is the unit snapshot. You can filter it if you want to. We're going to move on real fast and go to the EARS data. So I know we've talked about the EARS form a lot. If you are using this EARS data form, you can choose the unit you want to. We have the option to include incomplete records. So like I said, it's up to you whether or not you mark as incomplete, because we do have the option to export it that way. You want to mark it as complete before the end of the reporting period. And you can choose your date range, or you can just go based on the reporting period. Then you'll run your report, and you can see it's all filled out and pretty, and everything is where it's supposed to be. And so you can go back and look more on it later if you want to, but this is the EARS form, and it took nothing but the click of a button, and there it is. So next we have the duplicate contacts section, and if you have, this kind of helps filter how many contacts you've made that are duplicates. So it basically counts, it takes the number of sessions in a program activity and then multiplies your demographic information and just shows how many times you've made those contacts. So it's an estimate, but it is a tool that you have to kind of see how many times you have been in contact with a person and given them SNAP-Ed information, whether or not you've been in contact with them before or not. So impressions is really what it's more counting here, the number of impressions. So next we'll move on to our exports, and because they're very similar, I'm not going to show all of them, but I will give you the basics. So here we have our program activity export, and if you want to export, you just click that button, and then let's see, can you see my Excel sheet that just popped up?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, so that gives you have a code book, and then I only have my one program activity, but if you'll see, there's all these fields you can go through here. You can see information about sessions, and so that's how you're going to do that. And if you had multiple program activities, clicking that export button would export anything shown on the page. So if you want to filter down, and maybe I just want to see all of Trent's stuff, and he has multiple program activities. If I export that, it's going to show me all of the program activities that are listed there. If you want to export what's on a specific program activity and include any related survey data, you want to actually go to the program activity itself, click the More button, and then download the specific Excel report for just that program activity. Because as you'll see, there's a different tab for each survey that you've done. So anyway, we will move on. And then the way program activities was set up, PSCs is set up very similarly to where anything that you have on this page is going to be included in your export. The only thing that is, the only export that's set up differently is the template export. And the way that works is you're going to choose a survey template, and it will export any information that you have access to. So if you have access to view everything in a unit, and this entire unit is using the food behavior checklist, for example, when you export that, you're going to get all the related survey questions for that, or all the answers for that template that's happening in the unit. So you'll be able to see a list of the individual data and the related program activity ID. So that can show all the answers you're getting for a certain survey template. So with that, let's see. Very quickly, I'm just going to go over our support documentation and some of your account features. So if you, let's maybe look at your account first. If you go and hover over your name, you have this option to manage your account. Now from there, you're able to change your name, time zone, all kinds of different things about yourself, and check whether or not you receive email notifications when you're a delivery person. Then you'll want to save it if you change anything there. So if you get married, you don't have to call us to change your name. You can do it yourself. Here, this permissions part is really important. So in PEARS, we like to err on the side of caution and not let other users edit your data. But if you have someone that you're collaborating with, or you have an office professional, you can add them here, and then they will be able to edit your data. So anyone that's in PEARS. And you can see, you want to make sure you save that, but then you can see over here a list of your permissions, and so you can see the users that have given you permission to edit their data and the users that have permission to edit yours. And then if you have permission to see anything outside of your specific unit, you'll be able to see exactly what you have permission to here. Now, if you lose your password, or your password's been compromised and you need to change it, you can click this Change Password button, and by entering your current password and then choosing a new one, you can change that. Now, once you get in the system, you're probably going to have a lot of questions, because when you enter data, that's just what happens. So there's this little question mark that I pointed out before. As long as you go to the question mark, you're going to find some sort of support resources. So we have this support page, and we have all kinds of topics. If you want to search for something, maybe anything related to indirect activities, you can start typing, and then everything that matches that will start showing up in your search, and you can go there. So it'll find anywhere that those words are used. You can also browse by the topic that you're looking at, and you can look through this whenever you need to, but we have links to it throughout the site where they're relevant. So for success stories, we have links to the success story support documentation. And then we also show our contact information. So if you want, you can email us anytime, and we'll get to it during business hours. And you can also call us. We always have someone manning the phones. So from Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time, with very few exceptions, we are here to help. And if you leave a message, we will get back to you. So going back to the website now, you also have a list of resources that are going to be specific to you. So right now, you have all of these that we've entered for SnapEd, and all of these are links, so you can see things like SnapEd Connection and the SnapEd Toolkit. Then eventually you will have some resources that are specific to the California Department of Public Health. So things like those cheat sheets, that might be something that could also go here. That's really up to Lauren and Evan and anyone else on the call, but those could be here. And then you also have this directory. And so this shows you who the people are that are in your organization that you can contact for certain things. So like Evan is a user manager, and he's able to add users and grant user permissions. Then you have your organizational administrators, and you can read the descriptions here for what all of these roles are, but if you click on them, you're able to email, and an email form will pop up and you can contact people you need to contact. So with that, one last thing is we have this little search, and if you need to search the entire site for something, you can't remember whether something you entered was an indirect activity or PSE or whatever, for whatever reason you need to search, you can search your entire site, the entire site right here. And you can also filter by certain things too. So if you just want to search your program activities. So there, it'll show everything that you have access to. All right, and then by clicking that little PEARS logo, we are going to be back at the home page. And as I said before, that stuff would fill in as we started doing it, and we can see the participants we've reached and the number of survey responses, some of our success stories, and that kind of concludes what I have. I was trying to do a Cliff Notes version. Lauren, I know you have things that you want to add, so.
And just, I know we're over time, so I don't want to keep people, and I certainly appreciate so much people staying on a little bit past the time. You guys had great questions, and as we said at the beginning, I know there are so many questions. I wanted to just say a couple things. One is that that is great that we have the California-specific resources, and we will certainly be giving you information to put into there for everyone to look at. I know that I just wanted to mention that what Jesse showed, it was actually specific to California Department of Public Health. So for each of you, depending upon which state implementing agency that you are a part of, it will show different names there for the folks, so different contact names and different user managers. So just know that that was just an example from CDPH. I have some slides that I prepared that are just really summary slides of what we talked about in terms of California specific information. So I'm going to include those slides in the materials that are made available with the recording of the webinar. So I'm not going to go through those slides. I just wanted to have them for you to have something to refer to later on. But I think I will show you just the contact one, if that's okay. I'm looking to see if there were any other questions that we want to answer real quickly. Jesse, there's a question about whether any or all PEARS users can contact you individually, or do you want just one person? But I think you're open to anybody who's a PEARS user? Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times, if you don't have to go through as many people and we're just talking to the person that needs the help, things can get resolved fairly quickly. It's really, if your organization wants to do something different, that's fine, but we are more than open to talking to anyone. So as far as we're concerned, everyone can call us. And as I said, I know that there are several other questions, and we will certainly put those in the documents that we will create. Somebody asked where we can find the recording and the transcripts. We will likely send those out to all PEARS users, but then also post them on the training website the California SNAP-Ed training website, so I will also post those there. And those will be available, or I'll ask those folks to post those there, so those will be available. But we'll also send them out. I'll send an email out, or we will each send an email out to the users in our agencies with the recording link and the transcript. So let me just, can I go ahead and share my screen now?
Sure.
So let me find, sorry, I'm trying to find, now I don't see it, but okay. So let me find this. And go to this last screen. Oh, okay. So can you see that last screen with, here we go, with the contact information. So here are the different contact email addresses for each of the agencies. You'll see one for CDPH. There are separate folks listed for UC CalFresh for program activities and for PSE activities. Contact for California Department of Aging, and contact for Catholic Charities. Again, we'll make these available. We'll make these slides available so that you can get that information again if you need that. I think just in light of time, I'll leave this up for right now, unless, Jesse, do you need to show anything else, or I can leave this up for folks to?
Nope.
Okay. So again, my apologies that we couldn't get to every question, but we will certainly, as I said, make sure that we're addressing each question. Thanks for your patience as we go through some of the questions that require us to think about the sort of bigger picture across California and have a discussion with all of the state implementing agencies. And as we work through all the nuances of having a brand new system for things that were collected before that might not be collected now, and things that are being collected differently. So again, thanks for your patience and your just your flexibility in working with a new system. I think everyone's going to be thrilled with the new system. Feedback was that it's an easier system to use. So we really appreciate, again, everybody participating in this new data entry system for this year. So thank you again. Jesse, anything else to end?
I think that we are good. We are so excited to have you all use it, every bit of the system. And if you need help, just definitely contact our support number. And I can enter that here in the chat box. I see that there was a question about getting a PEARS account, and so talk to your administrators. We will be sending out email. Well, actually, a lot of people probably already have accounts, but talk to your administrators, and worst comes to worst, we will get you set up. So,
right.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can go ahead and contact, whoever the contact person is here. That person can help you get a user account for your agency.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
for sticking here with us.